Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by 3 Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for coffee and conversation. Welcome back. This is part 3 of our 3-part series, Nature, Hope, and Purpose, Finding Your Spiritual Center No Matter What You Believe. And we are joined once again by gerontologist and wellness expert, Cera Meintzer. And today we're going to take a look at purpose, what it means, why it's important, and how to find it. Thanks for joining us.
Well, welcome everybody. This is our third in a series of 3 on spirituality. And of course, we would never think of doing it without having Cera back with us. Cera, glad to
Thank you.
With us. And we promised you, the first one you remember was nature, and the last one was hope, and this one is about purpose. And as the elder in this group of 4, by a mile, I've got to admit that I have had some sort of an evolution in my understanding of what it takes to have a healthy longevity, to age successfully, to be fulfilled, or to get out of bed in the morning as you get older and, things hurt and weather's lousy. And now we're captives in our houses with COVID. And the value of purpose seems to grow daily for me. And that's supported by the research. There's a recent book out by David Sinclair. He's a Harvard researcher, and he has got his head buried in the DNA of people. And he's seeing how the DNA does change. Now, we have been reporting things like that with telomeres and that sort of thing, but he has gone even deeper to talk about how the DNA changes relative to resilience and a number of things with lifestyle, but purpose is huge. So what is it? It can be scary. So if you don't mind, ladies, I'm just going to make a few comments, take some time, make a few comments at about 5,000 feet. And then thankfully, I know you will have some very practical tips and some usable things. Sometimes I have my head in the clouds, but let's start with that. And I'd like to start with Mary Oliver. Mary Oliver's a poet. She's recently deceased, but a great poet. Used to live in my area in Massachusetts, but she has a poem in one of the lines. She says, "Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life." And the second quote is Mark Twain, and he said, there are 2 days that matter, particularly in your life: the day you were born and the day you find out why. Now, they're great quotes. I love them. I use them all the time. But I have a feeling that they might make someone think that this is a big deal, the purpose has to come out of the clouds with a big voice, or I have to search for it for years, and it has to be something I can brag about at the bar if we ever get to go to a bar again, or a restaurant or anything. And I think that's a little deceiving, and I think it's a potential barrier to actually finding your purpose. Purpose is necessary. There is absolutely no doubt. It's a spiritual component of the holistic approach to a healthy and brilliant longevity. And but what is it? We go through most of our lives where our purpose almost comes with the territory. We go to school, we want to graduate. We learn, we have a career, we get married, you want to make your wife happy, you want to make your husband happy, your kids, and then your kids are your purpose, And these things are almost, we make decisions about them, but they're almost placed on us. Then you get to this time when the kids are gone and you're there, and if you think for 1 minute that your purpose is over, you're in deep trouble, folks. Mark Twain says that, Mary Oliver says that, Roger Landry says that, and I have 3 other people here who will tell you that. Because I think this is the time when unencumbered, you can investigate, choose, find a purpose that is not only going to serve you well for the rest of your life as far as health and longevity, but regarding quality of life, the joy, the joie de vivre, the joy of life, and so many things that will be your compass through all the very challenging times that come, particularly in this, say the last chapters, the last third of your life. So I think it's incredibly important that we have it. It's but searching for it, sometimes we can give up prematurely. We think it has to be a big deal. It does not. Whatever brings you peace, whatever brings you a sense of value, whatever brings you a sense of I'm doing something that's meaningful, whatever gets you out of bed and makes you glad to be alive, despite the aches and pains and everything else. That's your purpose. And now that can be small, that can be large, your choice. But I have 3 people here who are going to, let's roll up our sleeves. Doc's been there in the abstraction. So let's roll up our sleeves and start to, drill down deeper on this whole topic so that we can leave here with some sort of sense of how I find my purpose as a listener.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I really like what you said. And so that people understand too, it can be more than one thing, and it changes and evolves as you change and grow as a person. And to your point about the DNA, I had actually mentioned it to us in a previous podcast, but recent research by Barbara Fredrickson and her team in positive psychology was showing how not just positive thinking and not just meaning and purpose, but how the two together dramatically influence gene expression and the aging of our cells and our, how our telomeres react to what we're doing. So to stay vital, you need a purpose. And to your point, Roger, when you say, I've heard you say this a number of times, it involves other people and socially connected. So now your purpose is not only helping you, but it's helping everyone around you. And I know Cera and I have talked quite a bit. You have done some research on purpose, Cera. Could you share some of what you've been finding?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Danielle. There's a researcher by the name of Kendall Bonk, and her colleagues wrote back in 2009, and I quote, that the research suggests that if we're able to revise and renew our sense of purpose as we navigate the milestones and the transitions, like Roger spoke about, through life, then we can look forward to a more satisfying, meaningful life. And I really agree with you, Roger, when you said that it's not this huge thing. It's not like, well, bam, it's going to smack you in the face. It's, I think we get that impression through our media, but purpose is really something we can cultivate. And I think of it as having layers. You could, kind of like a business, you could have a mission, you could have a vision first that you serve as a purpose, but then you could have, like today, my purpose is to do X, Y, and Z. And that might serve my bigger purpose, and it also might not. So I think it's really focusing on the ability to recognize what touches you and what makes you feel alive and feel excited, and then making sure that you have a little piece of that in every day of your life. It's a feeling for me. It's the difference between, like, I imagine kind of, if you think about like glitter or sparkles, like really dull, flat ones that just don't have a lot of oomph, and then you put some purpose into them and they light up. Like, just, I don't know, I don't even know what to compare it to, but it's this feeling of pizzazz for me.
We talk about energy, and the intrinsic part of spirituality. Yes, exactly. Yes. This is very much intrinsic, isn't it? I mean, it'll be manifested as an extrinsic thing, but it's really about that intrinsic response to it that is so meaningful to you, isn't it? Oh, and yes, you said other people, Danielle, but it's other living things, really. I think that, and who am I to say? Everyone chooses their own. But the ones in my many years that have seemed to resonate with people and to sort of propel them into a healthy longevity are things that help other living things, humans, plants, pets, animals, the earth, the climate, everything. But anyway, it can be, again, it's defined by the person themselves.
I know On our last podcast, Cera, you had talked about having love as one of your top strengths, and we'll get into strengths later because that one falls into my top 5 as well. And you talked about doing good works, which ties directly to purpose. Could you speak to that a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you can align your days and, if you're lucky, your work, meaning your job or what brings you income, if you can align that with your stronger character strengths, and you might just know those because you know yourself well, or you might use a tool, which I know we'll talk about, to help you understand what they are. So for me, love is tricky because I feel like it's not a thing that we're valuing very much right now. So when I first discovered that about myself, I thought, well, what the heck am I going to do with that? I mean, that might mean that my family feels loved by me, but how can I translate that into what I do? And so I spent a lot of time reflecting on that and really realized that it can come through in just about anything I do. And we need that more than ever right now. It's really a strength that we need to cultivate.
May I suggest a meditation? I don't know, like a circle, something where we meet several times a week with
Masterpiece circle, maybe.
Maybe. For those listening within our network, Sarah and I co-facilitate a meditation and mindfulness group 3 times a week, and it was the perfect place to get a little plug in where we. It's a good way to share the love and cultivate that connection.
And it's funny, Danielle, the idea for that came right on the heels of me focusing on my character strengths and thinking, how can I use these to better our world? So I think that most of us have a natural drive deep down inside, even if we don't recognize it at certain phases of life, to make the world a better place. I mean, at least I know I can speak for myself. So I think purpose comes to this sweet spot when you can figure out what you're good at, what you enjoy, and then what the world needs, right? I think there's a Japanese saying about that.
Yeah, what's so interesting to me, I'm sure many people have read The Blue Zones, Ikigai literally translates into live worth and is part of the formula for why people in Okinawa live so much longer. They have a reason to get up in the morning. It's so powerful.
Some of the roadblocks that people put out there for themselves, the I can'ts, like the growth versus a fixed mindset. I'm sure you've experienced that. Could you talk a little bit about what some of those roadblocks to finding your purpose might be?
Well, I talk to people often who have lost their sense of purpose, and they do feel incredibly lost. Dr. Roger, I've heard you say so many times, pulse. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. And we just can believe that even in the darkest times. We can just choose to believe that. I might not know what it is right now, but I'm a person who's willing to explore how to find it. Is so powerful, because when we believe we don't have a purpose, when we no longer have a purpose, we just shut that door and there will be no finding of purpose. So how can we open the door? We can just believe that we are someone who's going to find it or willing to explore. I think it's important that we know why. What's our why for continuing to live, for finding our purpose, for making the world a better place? And it's got to be compelling, because that compelling why has to pull us through the dark days, those days that we just aren't feeling it. That's when our why has to come into play. So just a couple thoughts about, when the days are dark and we really feel like we have no purpose.
It reminds me what you're saying, Teresa. I'm thinking of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. That intrinsic internal power and that attitude and that deep searching and realizing, like, I have the ability, I have the control. I think that stands out for me.
Yeah, his quote, and I know I'm not going to quote it exactly right, but he said the one thing that you have the power is to choose your attitude in any set of circumstances. And he's kind of the person that I always call to mind. He and Nelson Mandela are the two go-tos when I start griping about my day and I think, what would they do? How would they react? And that kind of kind of pulls me back. Sometimes I say, what would Roger do?
Oh, come on. Don't put me in company of such illustrious people. I admire those two also.
Yep.
Hugely.
Me too.
So, I don't want to sidetrack us here, but someone might be saying, okay, that all makes sense to me, but where do I find it? I mean, there's a cloud open up and a big voice tell me what it is. And I think this is why purpose is tied to spirituality. This is my impression. I'd like to hear yours, but because I think we have to be present, because I think we find our purpose when, as we navigate through life, some things sort of resonate. They make our DNA tingle. They catch our attention. They make us feel good. They make us feel valuable. And if we're not present to feel that, if we're off doing a list, we're rushing around, we may very well miss what our purpose is, at least for the time being, until we're open to it. Am I off track, Cera?
No, I don't think so at all, Roger. As you were saying that, I think second to presence is awareness. You have to cultivate the presence so that you can be aware of what's going on. So once you have that presence, then second is the awareness. And then I would say a close third to that is being curious about it. Because you might notice something through your awareness and then it might just, pass right on. But if you take that moment to be curious about it, I wonder what that means for me. That's where the juice is.
Juice. I like that. Juice.
Absolutely. And Roger, yes, we agree with you. It's absolutely purpose is tied into spirituality because it gets down to the universal question, who am I and why am I here?
The metaphysical questions. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so if we're aware, if we're present, we show up for our lives, even as mundane as some of the tasks may be. If we're there during those, we're going to be there when we feel our DNA tingle, so to speak, and feel it vibrate or resonate with that thing. And again, you may be shocked at what your purpose is. You may not be, because you maybe enjoyed doing something and it meant a lot to you, but then you, quotes, grew up, and life happened. And you put that aside as something that wasn't maybe valuable at the time in your life because you feel you had to be productive. Let me tell you, I've never been much of an artist. There was a time in my life when I considered myself to be particularly spiritual. I don't know why, but I was drawing. I started drawing. And so during this pandemic, we're all doing things, to just improve ourselves is one way to say it. Maybe just stay sane is another way to say it. But so I've been drawing again, and I get this. It's a form of meditation, right, Danielle? I'm sure it is.
So it's a form of mindful awareness. Absolutely, yeah.
Finding some peace, and I'm more aware of my surroundings. And so no matter what it looks like, but so I think that's exactly what it is. It doesn't force me. It provides an entry to be present, and therefore just the presence alone, it feels better. I feel more alive, and also I think I'm probably very fertile soil for anything that's coming down the pike that can add to my sense of purpose. I like to think of unusual things that maybe someone would not predict be purposeful. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Teresa, but tell me what it's like to walk through your almond grove, and what does that do for you? And is it related at all to your sense of purpose? You don't mind sharing?
It is. It's so I grow almonds here in Central California, like many others here in Central California. And so it's a nature fix, which is a big part of my spirituality and my purpose. Yeah, I walk through and I think about all the people in various countries that this crop will nourish. And I know that sometimes when we have a meal, we pray that the farmers will be blessed. Well, the opposite happens too, I want you to know. So at least for me, as I walk through the crop, I think about the people who will be nourished and send warm thoughts their way. When I planted this crop, it was a dark time for me, and it was a time it was tough for me to think about the future and see into the future. And so it was a kind of just an act of faith to put a permanent crop in the ground that's going to be producing for 25 years. And it sort of drug me into the future a little bit, and it's something I've become very proud of, and it is a huge part of my purpose. So sometimes even when things are dark, we can take a leap just because we choose to believe.
In the teenage years, we start to become, our awareness has moved just from self to a little bit further out family, to a little bit further out community, moving and extending the awareness out to the world and the country and the world and so on. And you start to become a little more aware that you're just one person in this huge place, this huge universe. So for me, I began to become aware of things that were important to me when I had the experience of having sinusitis, which is that infection of your sinuses, and chronic sinusitis, and tried all kinds of different things for it. Eventually, my mom found a book that was a more holistic approach than just taking antibiotics all the time. And so I dove into this book and I did everything it said. It was like massive amounts of vitamins and minerals and herbs and neti potting and, putting my face over steam and having a humidifier in my room. It was intense for a teenager to take on, but I was sick of feeling bad and having a headache and being tired. And so lo and behold, after about, I would say 6 weeks of this regimen, I got better and my sinusitis went away. And that was the first time in my life where I was like, I actually had some control over my health. Like, what happens if I do this or if I do this? I saw that connection. And that's where my love for wellness began. So I would say ultimately for me, most of the purpose I've experienced in my life stems from wellness and helping myself and helping others to feel whole and healthy and explore the part that they have control over.
That is such a good point, because now we have 2 examples on the show about how purpose has come from turning something bad into something good. And I have several examples I won't go into now that you mentioned that, where you've taken something that could have been unpleasant for a really long time and made a purpose out of it. And now you're helping other people with their lives. So that's a great, great example. Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. I think it was the first time I really, really felt empowered in my life. Like, wow, I just helped myself. And I didn't do it alone necessarily, but I had to keep the habits and set the pace and, make myself continue to do what I thought would help, not knowing that it would. But it turned out that it was the right thing to do for me.
So many people never get there, actually. Particularly older adults feel they lose the control or power that they have. And that's not a prescription for a healthy longevity. Oh, great story.
So, Cera, you had mentioned some of the character strengths. So maybe it's a good time to talk about tools. Maybe we can start there with, like, say, VIA and Clifton strengths. And by the way, anything we talk about, I'm going to make sure I have a link on the description to this podcast. So anybody who wants to play with these tools, most of them are free, you can. So to kick it off, can you talk about how do we find our purpose?
Yeah, I think one way is to explore using tools, and you can do that on your own, or you can do that through the support of someone who knows those tools well, if it's a coach or a therapist or someone like that as a guide. I think I don't know if it's the original, but the first one I think of that most people know is Myers-Briggs. that's pretty common. A lot of people know their Myers-Briggs. So I think that's a place to start, and oftentimes more business focused. VIA is a place where you can do character strengths. That's a good one. They all define them, and they all give kind of different borders to lots of characteristics that we have. My favorite is the Gallup Clifton Strength Finder. I like that because they have so many resources that they've created, and they just continue to create resources. They're like on year 3 of podcasts. So you can listen to all of them. Once you find out where yours rank, and what you want to focus on, you can look at the high notes of a specific trait, and you can look at what they call the basement of a specific trait to see those things and look for them in yourselves. So you can use their tools any way that you like, but you can use them to get stronger at what you've discovered that you're good at or what's natural for you, or you can use them to build strength around things that maybe aren't your natural place to go to. So I really like what they offer.
What I like about them is they help you too to hone in on what you value and what your interests are and how to wrap an opportunity around that. Because sometimes your interests feel so disjointed, like I have so many interests, how do I rein this in? And it helps you navigate what do I keep, what do I put on hold, and pulling it together. So for Myers-Briggs, even knowing you're an introvert versus an extrovert, my purpose is not likely to be standing on stage with thousands of people looking at me, but I can do a podcast as an introvert. I could be perfectly comfortable talking to a small group in my home. So that helps kind of navigate. And then with the Clifton strengths, which this is going to be no surprise, my top for Clifton is positivity. Go figure.
There you go.
So I do think they do a good job of really helping you realize what you value. And once you know what you value, they provide a lot of free tools for figuring out what that would look like in the world. So those are some good tools.
I saw a ball cap the other day and it had #pimpin' positivity. And I think that's what we should get you for your holiday gift.
I love that. That's great.
And I agree with all that, and that helps you to navigate through what otherwise might be sort of a jungle of trying to find your positivity. But then there's the element of serendipity, spontaneity, something that may happen, that may be the result of something that happened to you you never would have predicted. Teresa, you went through this. We all do, but in a big way. And that sort of changes. You alluded to it earlier. Purpose changes. Depending on where we are in our life, but also what happens to us in our life. We can undergo a rite of passage that was never predictable, just because things happen. And that can change someone's direction from maybe where their skills weren't, maybe because they never thought about it or never used them, and yet they can develop them, right? I mean, I totally agree with finding out where our strengths are, because more than likely that's where it is. But also leave the door open for life to happen and be responsive to that. Teresa?
Yeah, it helps to know ourselves a little better, and we all have blind spots. So to get to know yourself and your values maybe in a new light is helpful. And the other thing I would suggest is making a list of all the things that are interesting to you, maybe the things that you've always found interesting but you never had time for because your purpose was already kind of prescribed for you. And maybe now is the time in this chapter where you finally have time and energy to devote to that, or maybe you have new interests. To your point, Dr. Roger, it doesn't have to be this massive, purpose that falls out of the sky. Maybe you just want to learn about gardening and or painting, or whatever the thing is that you'd like to learn or are remotely curious about in this chapter of your life. That can lead us also to our passions, and our passions are so often our purpose. And a great way to build social connection while you're at it is if you love woodworking, for example, put someone's name next to woodworking on your list who loves it just as much as you do. Like, who's the person that you could talk for hours about a book with? So So building a list of people who have similar interests and passions, maybe you have some blanks, totally okay. But then now you know where your blanks are, and maybe you seek out new connections for that area that you currently have none. And that's a process that I coach people through, especially people who have really suddenly lost every ounce of purpose that they ever had. It's a great way to start reconstructing.
Teresa, you make such a good point. What are you interested in? Because we're not saying that just because it's not high on your strength list, you can't do it. You're open. I mean, sometimes your purpose, you're being called to learn something and do something you've never done before.
Yeah, we have to give ourselves permissions to be beginners and make that okay. In our society, we feel like we have to already know what we're doing and we have to get great results and it has to be a perfect outcome. And the truth is that none of that's true. If we're just willing to be a beginner, really magical things can happen.
Yeah, and be kind to yourself. And I think remembering to be kind to others, because we tend to give others a hard time if we see them in our society, oh, you are a beginner. Well, I'm better off than you are. Well, rather than that attitude, thinking about supporting each other and saying, good for you for being a beginner. You're only going to go up from here.
So when Teresa was saying explore your interests, it made me think of appreciative inquiry. And if you're not familiar, it's taking a look of creating a vision for yourself. And it doesn't start by what's your vision, because the answer is like, I don't know. It starts with, what are you interested in? What are you good at? What would you like to be better at? How do you show up for people? What environments do you like? Like, for example, I even said I like small groups, not necessarily big groups. So once you kind of hone in, these are just some interesting tools for exploring what does fill me up. And the last thing, Roger, you always say, what gets you out of bed in the morning? So there are some really good tools for reflection. And I can't get through a podcast without talking about meditation at least once. But you can sit down with some questions in your mind to reflect on, to meditate on. For example, what makes you feel most alive? When you picture the perfect day, what are you doing? And how might your gifts help others in doing something that you already find intrinsically interesting?
Great questions, Danielle.
So we've come to the end of this journey. We've had this is the third and 3 sessions on spirituality, and I want to thank you all, particularly Cera, as certainly one of our team members all the time, but only periodically here on this podcast. So thank you. You enhanced it greatly, and I
enjoy being the 4th P in the pod every once in a while.
All right. Well, be ready. Have your suitcase packed, because we'll ask you back. We all know this is sort of a mantra for all of us, that a holistic approach to a healthy longevity includes spirituality. It absolutely must. We have endeavored to pursue what spirituality is with these 3 sessions. We know that it's the search for, in fact, some people define it as the quest to find answers for the metaphysical questions of why we're here and what is our relationship to other living things and what is our meaning, what is our purpose. That can be very overwhelming to some, but it's the search, and that's what we should remember. We have one quote within the body of these 3 that said being spiritual is paying attention to what's important, but to what matters. Maybe that's a good sort of one word, one sentence thing to at least orient us. And it changes with time. I think we all agree with that, and where we are in life and what's happened to us in life. I think the search really does require that we be very present, that we be in touch with our inner self. What is it that makes us come alive? What small thing or big thing? And I think we've made it clear, this doesn't have to move mountains. This doesn't have to win gold medals. This does not have to be something you can brag about even. You can be proud of it for sure, but it doesn't have to be braggable. It's something that again, gets you out of bed, makes you alive, and it resonates. You will know when you have found it. You will absolutely know. You will have no doubt, because it becomes your lifeblood. But you must continue to pursue it. There are times when we don't feel like we have it, and that's not when you give up or say it's all over. That's when you become more present and aware of where your skills are to help you find it again, or just to be very open to what's happening around you. But you must have it. This is as important as moving, as important as challenging your brain. It's as important as being connected to others. It is absolutely critical, and we're seeing at the genome level the effect that it has on our bodies.
Don't forget, we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.